the power of love.
Yeah, what she said. Thank you, Leanne. Beautiful as usual. Thank you. Wow, we are so blessed. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Well, we're finishing up a series of study that has been one of the most influential works, I think, for me in many ways, on understanding and experiencing more of the blessings of Spirit in my life and how I can participate in that more. And I've heard from many of you that it's been a real blessing for you as well as we've gone through this. And it's spiritual economics, the principles and process of true prosperity. And again, I'm still trying to sell the books. I'm not, I want you to read it because there's much more in it than what I've been able to share with you on Sundays, and there's a lot of great wisdom and great understanding, and it really can make a huge difference in life when you begin to work with and practice some of these ideas and principles. And we've been really studying and understanding how we can develop within ourselves an experience and an awareness of the presence of God in our lives as abundance, as supply. And one of the biblical quotes is from Jesus, who said, "I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." And I'm convinced that that's one of the things that we're all called to do, that we're actually being called consistently to move into an awareness and an experience more of that presence of the divine in our life as well-being, as abundant good in our lives, as blessings, that there's a blessing that is trying to right now pour itself in and through you into life. And it is the very essence of that creative power and source of our being, and you and I are aspects of that creative power. We are created in that image and after the likeness of the Spirit of God, and therefore we are creative beings ourselves, and we are participating in that creative process. And we're continuing to participate in that creative process even in everything that we do and everything that goes on in our lives. And so as I was looking at different ways to share some of these ideas, I came across a story. And there was a man and a woman who had been married for more than 60 years and they had shared pretty much everything in their marriage. And they had really kept no secrets from each other, except that the woman had a small box that she kept in the top of her closet. And she made her husband swear that he would never bother that or never ask her about it, that was her box and that was her private box for her. And they shared everything else in life. And so after all those years, he'd never bothered, never thought about the box and just didn't, stayed away from it. And but as she began to reach the end of her life, they were trying to kind of sort out their different affairs and make preparations and things. And she agreed that it was time that he should know what was in the contents of the box. And so he went and got the box and pulled it out. And inside the box were two small crocheted dolls and $95,000. And so he asked about the contents of the box and said, well, when we were married, she says, my grandmother gave me some very sound advice. And she told me that I should never argue, and if I ever got angry, that I should crochet a doll. And he was kind of delighted. He said, well, he was really tickled that there were only two dolls in this box. And he said, wow, in 60 years, you've only gotten angry with me. Wow. And he was just delighted that was the case. And he said, well, okay, so that explains the dolls, but what about the $95,000? And she said, oh, well, that's the money I made on selling the dolls. I'm convinced that God is trying to bless us in every way possible if we will use our gifts and talents in a way that allows us to go into the flow. Even, even our frustrations, that Spirit will use those to move us in a positive way if we're open to that possibility. So anyway, I also came across this story about a man who had decided that his wife was getting hard of hearing. And so he called the doctor to make an appointment to have her hearing checked. And the doctor said, well, okay, we'll make an appointment, but there's actually a little test that you can do in the meantime to see, what the extent of it, and it'll kind of help when we get here to know what the extent of our hearing loss is. And so he said, well, so start when you're about 40 feet away from her, and then speak in a normal voice, and ask her a question. And if she hears you, then great. If not, go a little bit closer. Go about 30 feet and ask her a question. And then if she doesn't respond, still go about 20 feet and ask her a question. And then, all the way down to about 10 feet and ask and wait for a response. And so he decided, well, he's going to try that. And he said, let's see. Doctor said, let's see what happens. And so he says, he's about 40 feet away in the living room. She's in the kitchen. And he says, honey, what's for supper? No response. So he goes about 30 feet closer and, honey, what's for supper? And still no response. And goes about 20 feet. Honey, no response. Honey, what's for supper? No response. So about 10 feet. Honey, what's for supper? I told you 5 times, it's chicken. I resemble that remark. Today, we want to talk a little bit about that very phenomenon in some ways. We have a tendency sometimes in life to think that the problem is out here in the world, don't we? And I think this is oftentimes true when we think about the idea of abundance. That we think that the problem is out here in the world. And one of the things that Eric is trying to help us to understand that, yes, we may see many times the results of our experiences and our thinking and our consciousness out here in the world, but it's really important for us to recognize that we need to have our own hearing checked. Meaning that we need to really metaphysically and spiritually understand that our fortune does begin with us, and that our work really is about making ourselves aware of how we are showing up in our experiences in life. And that he's talking about an understanding that we can have and experience a new world order and a new world vision, a new way of being in the world. And the world is actually in many ways dependent on us having a new vision of the world. Let me read just the very beginning here. He says, repeatedly we've stressed the point that economic conditions, no matter how dire they appear to be, are in the world out there. And what counts for you is how we deal with them in consciousness. When you begin to see things from the higher perspective, the ever-presence of God's substance, you will be in the creative flow of abundance, which will bless your life with sustained affluence. And it will go also further, it will go forth from you as a prospering influence in the world. And so one of the things that he quotes here is a scripture from John 12:32. He says, quotes Jesus, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto myself. This includes the ladies. I'm sorry, it's sexist language. We're still trying to clean that up, but we're getting there. I'm not sure exactly the best way to say it other than when we are lifted up, when our consciousness is lifted up, when our energy is lifted up, we are actually lifting up the consciousness of the world. And so when we're studying prosperity, it's important for us to recognize that not only is this about helping us to experience more of the blessings in life, but one of the things that Eric is trying to help us to understand is that we have not only the opportunity to experience these amazing blessings of spirit, but in a very real way, we have an obligation. Because we are so connected with all of life that it's really our work to help lift the consciousness of humankind into an experience and a knowing that there really is only one presence and one power. There really is only one source. And that only happens when we begin to really allow ourselves to move and allow our being to come from that space. Does that make sense? So we've been called. You know, we're not here by accident. We're not learning these things by accident. There is something that is within us that's trying to move us into a greater experience and blessing in life, because the world needs that. The world needs your prosperity consciousness. Do you realize that? And you're not being selfish by becoming more prosperous. I was thinking about this last week, and one of the things that we've been studying on the week, once a month, is the Ask and It Is Given work by Esther and Jerry Hicks, the Abraham work. And one of the things that Abraham says is that, imagine, we have a tendency to sometimes think that wanting to be prosperous is somehow selfish. And one of the things they point out is that that's kind of like saying, if I have more health, I'm going to not have as much health this week so you can have more. Does that make sense? Doesn't make sense, does it? But we sometimes think that way when it comes to abundance. That in order for someone else to have more abundance, I have to have less. Or vice versa. If I have more, then that's automatically going to mean that someone else is going to have less. But when we really understand and recognize that there really is only one presence and one power, there really is only one source, and all of us have that connection to that source. One of the most valuable things that we can do for those around us is to create the energy and the consciousness within ourselves of abundance. In many ways, one of the things that will allow people to be more healthy in life, to experience more health in life, is for us to experience more health in life. Do you realize that? And if you try to give up your health in order to get somebody else healthy, how many times does that work for you? We've tried it, haven't we? And we've actually tried to get other people to be more prosperous and more abundant by not being prosperous, haven't we? And I'm going to suggest to you that it's an erroneous way of thinking. It is a way of thinking that says that there really is only so much abundance, there's only so much God, there's only so much of the source, and you know, if I take too much of it, someone else is going to have less. And it's an erroneous way of thinking. Now, let me clarify here something. That doesn't mean that we go out and we try to get all of the abundance there is and make sure that we've got it all and no one else does. Certainly you can get into a stingy consciousness, can't you? You can get into a consciousness of greed, which is really a belief system that says there's not enough, isn't it? And the moment you get into an energy and a consciousness that says there's not enough, then you actually are helping to create more of an experience of not enough. Sometimes that is created in ways that can cause you to experience lack in your life because of the law of cause and effect, the law of attraction. You will attract more lack in your life because you have this fear of not enough. Right? And so part of our work is to just simply practice this understanding that we live and move and have our being in the very essence of creative power and energy and source. And the more we can tune into that energy, we become instruments of that love and that light and that power and that abundance in life. And we find that there are infinite ways that we can be influenced and that we can influence life and the world. We create ripple effects. One of the things that Eric talks about is that the very act of our lifting our energy and our awareness into a greater experience of the presence of the divine as our source and experiencing the blessings that entails, the very act of doing that actually sends out ripples throughout the consciousness of life, of all of humanity. And so we become part of the solution to the challenges that we see in our world. It's important to also recognize that one of the principles behind the whole prosperity understanding is to be in the world but not of the world. He talks about being transformed by the renewing of our hearts and minds, and so we are not being conformed to the messages that we keep hearing and experiencing out here in the world of lack and limitation, and all the world is going to where in a handbasket. That's to say that we don't have challenges and crises. Do we have challenges and crises in the world?
Yes.
But that the solution to those challenges and crises in the world do not come from the world. Does that make sense? And that the way that we can make a difference in life, the way we can make a difference for others, is by really helping ourselves to grow into an understanding of that experience, and then being able to share that in different places in different ways in our lives from a place of awareness and a place of conscious harmony with that flow of creative being. So we are created to create even more blessings and good in our lives, in our world, and with others as well. One of the things that I came across is Ashley Brilliant says, I would gladly participate in any experiment that tests the effects on me of having sudden great wealth. I'm going to invite all of us to be open to that possibility. Wealth in terms of a wealth of knowing of our true nature and our true source, of who and what we are and what we've come here to be. So there's a couple of great points that Eric makes here that I wanted to bring out that really I think are valuable. And one is practicing this understanding that we live and move and have our being in the source of all creative power. And that makes us a part of that creative process. He says, wherever substance is at all, the whole of substance must be, and because substance is omnipresent, the whole universal substance must be present at every point in space and at the same time. I've always loved that understanding, and this is actually from Charles Fillmore's work, that there really is this presence of a creative source, a creative power. Some people, it's been called the matrix, it's been called a lot of different things, but the more we can practice this understanding that we are participating in creating life and creating experiences in life, the more we can tune into that, the more we will see that we are participating and making a difference. And then we get to have a choice in how we're going to participate in that. We actually participate from an awareness of the abundance of life, or we get into the anxieties and fears that there's not enough. Right? Yeah. So, one of the ways he says that there's no question that we are facing a world in crisis, but let us look at the word crisis as the Chinese see it through the awkward process of translating it from English. They use the symbols for two words, danger and opportunity. You guys heard this before? Well, I would say that we probably are experiencing a dangerous opportunity in life. Wouldn't you agree? We've gone through a very challenging time here in this country in many ways, and what we're seeing really is a shifting in awareness and a shifting in understanding that the whole energy about more, better, bigger, getting doesn't work. It doesn't work. And it really is actually not working, because even those who have gone through this experience are finding that it's like building sandcastles. And so really, it's really developing an energy and a consciousness of blessing and well-being and moving into an energy of how we can be present and giving of ourselves in some way, that we find that flow begins to happen more for us. We talked about how the way to get out of financial adversity, interestingly enough, is not to get, but it's to give. The way we keep the flow going is to tune back into that way that you and I have of giving of ourselves in some form, in some way. And it may be in a material sense, or it may simply be giving of our talents and our gifts, or simply giving of our service, or perhaps it's a sharing an awareness or an idea. But I'm going to suggest to you it's simply also sharing a consciousness of that presence, a consciousness of well-being, a consciousness of good in life. And so the more we can tune into that energy, the more difference we make. I want to read to you a quote he gives from Teilhard de Chardin. He says, "There's now incontrovertible evidence that mankind has just entered upon the greatest period of change the world has ever known. The ills from which we are suffering have had their seat in the very foundation of human thought. But today, something is happening to the whole structure of human consciousness. A fresh kind of life is starting. In the face of such an upheaval, actually shaken by it, no one can remain indifferent. Actually shaken by it, swept along by the tide of affairs, what can we do to see clearly and act decisively? No matter what reactions we may have to current events, we ought first to reaffirm a robust faith in the destiny of humankind." And so one of the things I want to throw out here is that you will find that there are all kinds of predictions of gloom and doom in our life, in our world, aren't there? Anybody seen any lately? And you have the opportunity to accept that as the truth. But I'm going to suggest to you what Teilhard de Chardin is saying. He's saying that these are really a catalyst for helping humankind, for you and I, to become all that we have been created to be. He gives a great example in here of a study that was done at Amherst University some years ago with a squash. And they put these amazing bands around this squash, and they kept feeding it and watering it, and the squash kept growing, and the squash kept growing and growing and growing until they had to reinforce the steel bands that they put around it, because it was actually starting to break and crack the bands that they'd put around it. And eventually they wound up, the squash kept growing, and eventually it did rupture. And when they went in and studied it, what they discovered was that the fibers inside that squash were so hard, they were so solid, and they said it was like the amount of roots that this thing had put out, 80,000 feet of roots had grown. So I think it's an amazing, wonderful metaphor for what life is and can be for us. In our class this last week on relationships, one of the things that the primary lessons in it was that there's really two basic purposes for our relationships, and I would say for our life in general. And those two basic things are, Will Bowen calls it fun, but I would say joy, is to experience joy, and the other one is to experience growth. And one of the things that really was a valuable part of that lesson is that we get the joy when we go through the growth. He has a great saying. He said that, in life, in school, life is really like a school, but in school, you get the lesson and then you get the test, right? But he said when it comes to relationships and life in general, you get the test and then you get the lessons. Isn't that true? Yeah. So we find ourselves tested, and then we kind of go, okay, well, what the heck was that all about? And oftentimes we miss the lesson because we think it's about them. Right? That's where we automatically, you can actually just go ahead and put an F on your paper on that one. Because ultimately, truly, it really isn't. And the reality is that's true in terms of our prosperity. One of the things that we talked about is that we always have a relationship with everything. And one of the most invaluable relationships that we have is with our money and our finances. It can be one of the most valuable, most rewarding ones that we have if we have a healthy relationship with it. And a healthy relationship basically means that you have a healthy respect for it, you care about it, but it's not the most important thing, but at the same time, it's also not unimportant. And so it's important for us to have the kind of relationship with our finances and our money that we would want in any relationship. We want it to be a healthy relationship, one that is a sharing and a giving, and one that makes a difference that's positive for all of us. And that's true in terms of our intimate relationships, with our work relationships. What we want is to be able to be in that relationship with our abundance in a way that we are being supported, but we're supportive in the sense that we are being instruments and channels for a greater good coming through us. That makes sense? And so part of our unfolding and work is to recognize that we are making a difference in life, and we are participating in creating the kind of economy that can be and the kind of world that can be. One of the things he points out here, and I know this is a question that comes up, he says, well, didn't Jesus say that the poor will be with us always? And I think it's important for us to recognize what Jesus is really talking about here. One of the things that Charles Fillmore did, the co-founder of Unity, he shocked the world really back in I think probably in I don't even know exactly, probably the 20s or 30s or 40s, somewhere in there, but he basically said it is a sin to be poor. So what do you think when you hear that? What does it say to you? How does it? Yeah.
Shut up.
Shut up. Yeah. It's like, I don't like that.
It's a misunderstanding.
It's a misunderstanding. Yeah. So he was really talking about consciousness, wasn't he? And when he was talking about a sin basically, we've talked about a lot, is a sin is an old archery term that means that you have basically, ooh, hello. When I turn my head, when you shoot an arrow at a target and you miss the target, that means that you've sinned. It means that it is a way of correcting your aim. And so sin simply means an error in awareness or an error in attitude. And when he's talking about poor, he's talking about the frustration of our own divine potential. He's not talking about not having money. He's simply talking about it is an error in our consciousness to not fulfill our own unique divine potential. Does that make sense? And Eric challenges us. He says, how many of you feel like you are really living fully up to your potential? I'm not raising my hand, are you? I think there's so much more that's possible for me, and I know it's possible for you, to experience the blessings in life. And part of the challenge that we're being invited to participate in is to step into a knowing that we can grow in ways that are not only beneficial to us as spiritual beings, but also that there are these amazing ripple effects by our actually doing this work, making the difference, growing in our own understanding and experience of the abundance of life. And the more we can practice this, the more we become instruments of that abundance in so many different ways. So, when we think about this idea that there will be poor always, what really Jesus was talking about is that there is going to be in consciousness this belief system that says there's not enough. But we have the opportunity to either buy into that and accept that, or we can recognize that there really is an abundance in life, an abundance in source. A lot of this idea came from a philosopher many, many years ago called Thomas Malthus. How many of you ever heard of the Malthusian Theory? It's if you've ever studied any economics, he's basically the founder of this idea that there's a limited supply. And I'm going to suggest to you that this is an error in understanding and consciousness. Here's an example that I can give for you, and it'll be a challenge in many ways for some, but I'm going to suggest to you that our country, this country, has never ever had an energy shortage. Never. We have never ever had an energy shortage. It's a myth. It is not true. It is very true that we have at times had a petroleum shortage. It is times we have had a natural gas shortage. There are times we've had but we have never had an energy shortage. Because there are myriad ways for this country to produce energy. There are numerous ways that we haven't even begun to tap for this country to produce energy. This isn't a political statement, folks. I'm not being political here. I'm just giving you specific awarenesses about the abundance of the universe. The reality is there's never been a health crisis. There's no such thing as a health crisis. The crisis really is waking up to the understanding that our very being is built in and created in the whole experience of life, which is unlimited. And the crisis really is a crisis of awareness, a dangerous opportunity for us to make a choice, right? And so the reality is that's true in terms of our economy. It's true in terms of our own individual economy. That you and I have the opportunity to participate in belief systems that say that life is great or life is going to, wear in a handbasket, right? So in wrapping up this study of spiritual economics, one of the things I would encourage and invite you to do is that recognize that every time we are in a place where we are working with this idea of there's not enough, I'm going to suggest that you take time to be conscious and aware in that knowing and that experience that there really is only one presence and one power in the universe. And that presence and power is absolute abundance, and it is present right here, right now, in this moment, in this experience. And then open yourself up to the ways that the Spirit of God can move through you to express that abundance in some form, in some way. There will be some inclination of a way for you to show up as abundance. One of the things that Eric says is that we often sing, and we sing this every Sunday here, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. And so I'm going to suggest that we sing, let there be abundance on earth and let it begin with me. This is the work, isn't it? This is a big part of what we're here to do, is to share that understanding that we are created in the image and after the likeness of this creative, amazing abundance in the universe. And we get the opportunity to participate in that in a way that is showing up as a blessing for ourselves and for those around us in life. And I will close with quoting Gandhi. I'm kind of paraphrasing Gandhi. Gandhi said, be the change that you wish to see in the world, right? Well, let's not just make it change. Let's say, make it be the wealth and abundance that you wish to see in the world. It's in you. You are created in the image and after the likeness of abundance. And so allow that abundance to come through you as inspiration, as ideas, as possibilities, as moving into all that you are created to be, because that is not, that's kind of the opposite of it's a sin to be poor. It is a blessing for you to be the wealth in your world. Can you see that? Yes. Are you willing to accept that in your life as a possibility? Yep. I'm willing to be the wealth in my world. Wow, that's a powerful statement, isn't it? Would you share that with me? I'm willing to be the wealth in my world. Breathe that in. Feel what that feels like. Feel what it feels like to be the opportunity for abundance to flow into and through you into the world. Thank you, God. And let's move into our meditation time. And I think we've got a song first, don't we?